How often do you think about the Oscars? About how many Oscar-winning films there are and how many you've seen? Yeah, there's a few famous Oscar-winning films that we've all seen. You know, The Godfather and Lord of the Rings and Titanic. I'm King of the World, all that stuff. But the Oscars have been running since 1927. There are currently over 1,000 films, feature-length films, which have won an Oscar. How many have you seen? I did the numbers for myself. It's not many, and I consider myself quite a movie buff. So here then is the premise of this podcast. Every episode, I and a rotating cast of 2 guests will randomly select one of the 1,000 films that have won an Oscar, watch it, and talk about it, with the only requirement being that one of the 3 people on each episode has to have never seen the movie before we talk about it. That will get difficult with Star Wars. Please note that our coverage of a movie does not constitute an endorsement of it. My least favorite movie of 2016, David Ayer's Suicide Squad, won an Oscar for Best Makeup, while my favorite movie of 2016, The Handmaiden, wasn't even nominated for anything. Please also note that our coverage of a movie is not a blanket endorsement of any or all of the people involved in it. A lot of terrible people have won Oscars. Kevin Spacey won an Oscar 20 years before he was outed as an abuser, and Roman Polanski won one 20 years after. But every film, good, bad, or in many cases mediocre, that has won an Oscar is an important part of film history just for being there. And they all, on some level, deserve a tiny bit of consideration, even if that consideration ends up concluding that it's garbage. And with all of that in mind, I'm your host, as always, Ellie McConaughey, and with me today is Jasmine Garcia.
All I could think of is singing the song because that has been stuck in my head since I watched this movie.
And Darren Lundberg.
Well, Jasmine, you stole my line. I was going to do Cat Ballou.
Cat Ballou.
And we're here today to talk about the 1965 film Cat Ballou, which won, God, where's my thing? It won Best Actor at the 38th Academy Awards and was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, Film Editing, Scoring of Music, Adaptation, or Treatment, and Best Song for The Ballad of Cat Ballou. I did call it Cat Ballou in the previous episode, and much like Sound of Music, you're going to have to make your peace with the fact that I'm going to mispronounce it at some point.
God.
I don't really like... I don't want to say this movie's insubstantial because I feel like that's an insult, but like this is a deeply silly movie to have to like do a quick plot summary of.
I had to look up what it won an Oscar for. I was like, what did this win an Oscar for? Like, I didn't even know. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I guess that makes sense. But yeah, you're right. It's deeply silly for all this Academy Awards attention. Strange.
Mm-hmm. So it's like kind of like a comedy Western is the long and short of it, dear audience, about a lady whose father gets killed by a land grabbing guy, and she vows revenge and becomes an outlaw, blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to figure out, like, it is well received. It's still, like, well regarded, I think. Yeah, AFI's 10th greatest Western or something.
Interesting.
I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm missing something. I guess it was, like, a very early... We're still what? Like, this is 65, so we're still, like, nearly a decade out from Blazing Saddles, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really does kind of feel like this movie was kind of, like... It is a Western. It's unquestionably a Western, but it's also kind of poking fun at the tropes, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, of course, we would all see this done way better in Blazing Saddles eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why.
It's interesting because, like, there are moments where I feel like they're playing the Western stuff reasonably straight. And then there's, like, these extended beats where, like, I really like the one where her father is like trying to get the 3 dudes to leave him alone, and the second he walks away from them, he gets shot. Like,
that is a hell of a final word to have. All of you just let me breathe. Bang.
Oh. It won Best Actor for Lee Marvin, who played both the drunk ass gunfighter and the villain.
Oh, so that nose thing was a really good gag then. I didn't even realize it was the same guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have that written very late in my notes. Like, oh, Lee Marvin is playing both characters.
Mm-hmm.
But it was funny because I sat there the whole time going, because Lee Marvin comes in very, very late.
He does.
And he won Best Actor. And so I was like, why did he win just for a comedic performance? Oh, I guess he's doing a dual role. I guess that gets you some respect or a modicum of respect with Academy voters.
And I mean, I didn't notice, so clearly the man has range.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of a trap to worry about like how much screen time someone gets. Like, as people love to point out, Anthony Hopkins won Best Actor for Silence of the Lambs. He's in that movie for 15 minutes.
But what a 15 minutes, man.
What a 15 minutes. I'm just looking at the competition and I'm like, okay, so I've never seen The Spy Who Came in from the Cold. Here's one that's kind of causes us all to suck air through our teeth. Laurence Olivier, Othello.
Oh, no.
As Othello.
Oof. You know, there's something ironic about you mentioning that the weekend Maggie Smith died.
Just like, Lawrence, don't do that.
Yeah, no, because, no.
Well, I think I had a conversation with Brian Scuttle of Sonic Cinema. Orson Welles did blackface for Othello.
Mm-hmm.
So many actors have.
Yeah, for Othello, I don't know if it's excusable because we know that Welles is very like pro civil rights, and he did the Voodoo Macbeth, so he was very progressive as far as that goes. But when he did Othello, I think they shot it over a period of like 7 years, and so he just couldn't have a lead actor just stand around for 7 years so they could shoot randomly. So like I said, I don't know if it's excusable, but like for Welles in the 50s, but by the time Olivier does. Didn't they have black actors that could have done that job?
Absolutely.
I mean, they always had black actors who could have done that job. They just refused to hire them.
Seriously, Poitier wasn't around? Like, it's just weird. Or was it just Olivier's, like, his ego that didn't let anybody else?
I mean, Olivier was famously kind of egotistical, but also, now you just made me picture the universe where Sidney Poitier did play Othello. God damn it.
Right.
I mean, yeah, Poitier was definitely working and famous at this point. You know, he is that we are, to reference a previous episode, this is 2 years we have In the Heat of the Night. I think he'd even won an Oscar at this point. What did he win his Oscar for?
Lilies of the Field, right?
I think so. Let me look. Yeah, Lilies of the Field in 1963, so 2 years before this. So yeah, there were definitely black actors, but also I think Jazz is onto something there. Like Olivier just always wanted to play the lead role, which, you know, I think that's common among dudes. Like, I'm also looking at you, Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah.
At least Kenneth Branagh didn't do blackface the one time he was in an Othello.
That's you know what, fair. He did decide to play
Iago.
Iago, that's the name.
Yeah.
And of course chewed the scenery beautifully, as he always does.
You don't hire Kenneth Branagh for an understated performance.
No.
Nope.
And you don't hire anyone in this movie for understated performances, and we're back on topic.
Yes. And actually, I was going to say, speaking of playing races that you are not.
Oh boy.
Goddamn, it's a shame that the actor who played Jackson was in fact a white man, because honestly, this is a much more nuanced characterization for a native character than I would have expected from a Western.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with Fonda's like activism for civil rights and things like that. It's strange in the 60s even, right? It's I couldn't find any histories on why that was allowed, or it was just, did they not have Indian act? I don't know. I'm not.
I think it's just what they did back then. It's stupid. They shouldn't have done it, but it is what they did.
Right.
I feel like the push to hire Native actors to play Native Americans, and I'm not an expert, obviously, so don't get on my ass if I'm wrong, audience, didn't really start kicking into like the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Which was not coincidentally around the time they just stopped making Westerns.
And not for nothing, it took until the 90s for an actual Native American actress to play fucking Pocahontas. And even then, it was still, again, a super inaccurate portrayal. What a surprise.
I know that Native Americans are very proud, and so the way that Indians were portrayed in Westerns and movies at the time, I don't think they would have wanted to play caricatures. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess. But again, Jackson actually is not a caricature. He actually is
He's not.
He's a character, actually. And I was like, I actually really like this guy.
Who quotes the 14th Amendment, right?
Yes, he does. It was very funny.
Yeah.
He's a very funny character. And there was like that whole bit where Cat's father was insisting that, you know, basically giving Mormon propaganda, and he's just like, that's just not true. What are you doing?
That's what it was. I was like trying to figure out like what am I missing here, and like, oh god, that's right. The Mormons believe that, don't they?
Yeah.
Fuck.
The fucking Mormons.
No, like I was watching it. I really liked the bit towards the end where he's just like, oh, you're gonna go. Where one of them is like, oh, you're gonna live off the land now that we don't have the ranch anymore. He's like, no, I don't want to do that.
And he's just like this. He's the snarky best friend. Like he and Kat are clearly have a great relationship. He's just like making quippy comments. It's like, I love this guy.
It's funny because Jasmine, I totally agree with that. Like she meets Jackson, right? And then she has that like deer in the headlights look for most of the movie. And then they're at the party and he says something to her. I can't remember what he says, but she calms down and it's like she switches characters and she's like, Jackson, I can't tell. You have a look on your face. I can't tell if you're serious or not.
Mm-hmm.
And from right then it's like, oh, now they've got a bond. It was interesting. I liked how they were just kind of, pals from that point on.
Mm-hmm. I liked them a lot. I actually really liked the party scene. I liked those like that
was so fun.
Those very long shots of her like dancing through the crowd, switching conversations.
Yeah, I love that. Great.
Very madcap and wacky. It was great. It was but this whole movie was very madcap and wacky.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, like sorry, Ellie, the Indian stuff with Tom Nardini. Is it because it's goofy that we aren't quite as upset about it, or we don't take as big of a I'm just curious what everybody's thoughts are.
Oh, I do take offense to it, but I recognize, but it's unfortunately just a matter of recognizing it was just the way it was at the time. And unfortunately, if you're going to watch older movies, you're going to have to grit your teeth through shit that was not okay,
right.
Never was okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to accept the reality that is how things were. But I still love this character.
Yeah, it's a spoof, so it doesn't treat it as... It's interesting that since it's a spoof, it doesn't treat him as a caricature. Like he's an actual intelligent character that you side with.
Mm-hmm. I think Jasmine kind of hit it on the head there. Like part of the point of this whole pod is like going over, a lot of older movies, some of which I've seen, some of which I haven't. One day I'm going to roll Gone with the Wind. I'm going to have to fucking deal with it.
Do that one.
You could just not.
But I think that if you are going to engage with older films, and I think that there is a lot of value in that, you're just going to have to there's going to be, I referenced Silence of the Lambs a few minutes ago. That is one of the greatest horror movies of all time. And there's chunks of it where I'm sitting there going
yeah.
You tried.
Right. Well, I completely agree with you guys. I'm sorry to go so deep so fast.
No, it's 100% fine.
Being a half Asian and seeing how Asian characters are represented in movies, and John Wayne playing freaking Genghis Khan, and
Jesus Christ.
It's just I agree. It's just how it was. Like I personally, I don't like it, and I kind of you thumb your nose at it, but it's like, well, that's just how it was. Like they weren't as progressive as they wanted to be or could be. And so looking as a half Asian and just barely within the last 10 years kind of take some agency over that and realize how we've been represented. It's like, well, there's just it's better now, and I don't know, I can't get too upset at it because it's like that's just how it was.
Yeah, exactly.
And John Wayne as Genghis Khan is just the pinnacle of that. It's like what? But
I would argue Mickey Rooney and Breakfast at Tiffany's is even worse.
No, you're right. That's worse. I will never. Genghis Khan is not The Conqueror is not a good movie, but Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I've only seen once and I enjoyed, and they spoof it later in Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. When I saw that perspective from Dragon, I was like, oh, I don't like that at all. And the fact that Rooney, I think he leans into it, he's not apologetic at all from what I've. And so, yeah, Breakfast at Tiffany's is a movie that I will never watch again, but it's still
don't blame you.
Yeah, it's still something that I enjoyed because it's Audrey Hepburn, obviously, but I'm never going to venture into that again. It's that caricature is so, it's not even funny. It's so over the top that it's not, I don't know. It's bad.
It's like, who thought this was a good idea? Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm actually half Dominican. So to a certain degree, I get it. It really sucks that people like us were so looked down upon that it was
normal.
They thought it was totally okay to have a bunch of white people pretend that they're us, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
There's this really interesting video on racism in horror by a YouTuber that I reference all the time on the show, The Morbid Zoo, where she talks a little bit about how people keep trying to like engage with that through horror, engage with that history through horror, and like I feel like it's one of those things in history where again, like if you're gonna watch older movies, there's just gonna be shit in there. Like the dude, there's a extended beat in this movie where the dude is basically like trying to trick Cat into sex.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yeah.
gross? Yeah, but you know what? It's the 60s. At least when she says no, he's like, okay, I'm out. That's
Again, it's one of those weird things where it's like you're still doing a bad thing, but you're being more progressive than average of your time.
I really like that scene with Clay where she's in the bedroom and she's like, he leaves and she's like, where are you going? She says it twice. And the second time he's like, the barn? Like, I thought that was, as a romantic comedy kind of push-pull, I thought that was really clever, the way they were, you're right, Jasmine, the way it's progressive, but still kind of, delving into those same kind of ideas that we kind of cringe at now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Progress doesn't stop. That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the whole weird back and forth between Cat and Clay. I mean, Ellie and I were talking about this. It's just like I really honestly feel like that she and Jackson would have been a better couple.
More to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. Clay is such a weird character in that I found him like more charming than I was expecting based on his introduction.
Right.
But I didn't really buy
and his performance.
the romance angle at all.
No. Like it's just one of those things where it's just like, if this scene was happening with a couple I believed in, I would absolutely be cheering. But unfortunately,
well, I get that they hint like Catherine at the beginning, like she's quoting Tennyson, but she's actually reading that the pulp magazine, right? She's attracted to that side, even though she pretends I'm a school teacher. So I think she's attracted to that. So that is what, but it's like that's not really a long lasting relationship, I guess. Like you always like in Last of the Mohicans when it's Daniel Day-Lewis and Madeline Stowe. At the end, I'm like, well, are they going to be a couple for life? What are they going to talk about? Like, it's always one of those, you wonder how they're going to exist past the frame, I guess. But yeah, you're right. Like, you can tell between her and Jackson, it's like they have they talk about more things. They side with, when they're at the barn dance and she like punches the guy out that was insulting him and they do the Indian whoop, it's like they're kind of partners in crime in a way. I thought you're right. They would have been a better couple.
Mm-hmm.
They have such good chemistry, really. And yeah, but what do I know? What do I know? I wasn't writing in the 60s, I guess.
I do find like the question of like what happens to a couple after the movie ends kind of interesting because like my favorite romance of like the last few years and one of my favorite movies of this year is Love Lies Bleeding.
Yeah.
Which is this just incredibly toxic romance. And like, yeah, you can make the argument like it's got a happy ending. They get away and they get together, but like, what are they going to do after that? I don't know. Movie's over. They cease to exist. She's dragging that girl's body out of the truck, and that's the end of the movie.
Well, then you have movies like Notting Hill that kind of flash forward and show Julia Roberts, pregnant, like on a bench. So you can pull that off and make it believable if you want.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I literally just watched Notting Hill from my friend River's podcast, and I actually do not buy into the relationship at all past a certain point, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's so I think that's kind of like one of the driving elements of one of my least favorite sequel tropes, which is this couple that got together at the end of the movie, they broke up, but they're going to get back together over the course of this movie again. I'm like, well, shut the fuck up then.
Boo! Just keep them together. What's the point?
Right. Well, you have to lean in, like with Friends or whatever. You have Ross and Rachel where they get to, and there's still like what 8, 10, 20 seasons left. So they have to break up at some point. I don't know. It's just those tropes that you do have to lean into if you're going to keep something going like that.
I mean, you really don't, which is the thing. Writers who feel like they have to break up a couple just to keep them interesting are fucking cowards, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Everyone got pissy at the X-Files for breaking up Mulder and Scully in season 10. Like, why'd you do that? They have a good dynamic.
Right. Ugh. Knowing full well they'll get back together.
Yeah, but anyway. I have to say, like, this movie has like 3 different opening gimmicks, and it kind of was a good predictor of things to come. In which this is not a movie. This is a season 1 of a television show that got squished into feature length.
I'm real surprised it didn't get sequels. Like, it was a big hit, right?
Yeah, it did not get sequels, but Interestingly, when I was saying that, I kind of want to reboot this as a TV show with like the people who did Wynonna Earp and Gallivant teaming up together. Turns out there were 2 attempts on making it a television show.
I'm reading that now,
but didn't work out.
Leslie Ann Warren, I think, was the hired for played her in at least one.
Oh, that's perfect.
That makes 2 out of 2 movies from the 60s I've covered that tried to become a TV show. Only In the Heat of the Night actually worked.
Yeah. Well, Jasmine, what were the 3 kind of gag hook that you were talking about? What were the, because I think I know what you're talking about. What were the precise 3?
So we had the animated opening.
Right. With the Columbia logo, right? Is that what you're...
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, not even that. You had like a brief bit of animation with her, being all gunslingy.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you got, of course, the opening song, and then you've got the actors' names in the book.
Right.
I did like the book. The book was cute. The song, they keep going back to it with Nat King Cole and
Stubby K.
Stubby K, yes, thank you. Acting is kind of like a Greek chorus.
Right.
The song feels like it's being made up on the spot, which I guess is the point.
Most of them do. It's just, it's interesting. It's. I was just like, I don't hate these songs. I just think they maybe needed a couple more drafts.
Right. I don't know how you guys felt. Like whenever the song would come back in, I would kind of lighten up because I like seeing Nat King Cole.
Yeah.
And Stubby. I mean, and this, you're right. It has a very improvisational kind of feel. I like when they're singing about Cat Ballou, and it's obviously like she's evil and she's got a dark heart, and that's not what we see.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Kid Shalene shows up, like you see that first guy that we think is him, and then, oh, this is it. But then Marvin tumbles out of the stagecoach, and they keep talking about how he's the devil and he's got steel eyes, and it's just not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the visuals that we're getting. I thought that was very clever. But yeah, I was seeing Nat King Cole, especially on the piano. I was like, oh, I could just let me sit and watch him forever. Because he died before
his release.
This movie even opened. Oh,
yeah, which is nuts.
My boyfriend walked in while I was watching the opening scene, and when they're doing the bit where the 2 singers are kind of like back and forthing with the group of old ladies, and he just looks at it and says, "That does seem like 2 people you'd see on the street, 2 groups of people you'd see on the street singing at each other," and just walked away.
And yeah, it's weird because that part almost felt like the kind of counterpoint Act 2 closer you see in like musicals.
Yeah. I just thought it was really interesting, again, the progressivism of having Nat King Cole be so front and center, but you've also got Nardini and Brownface, and then Jane Fonda, like being the activist that we know she is. It's just a weird, it's kind of a weird kind of mishmush of, everything.
I mean, like, I was looking over her filmography, and I'll look over it again now, but I feel like, she was known at this point, but like this was where she started to really blow up.
Yeah.
After this, we got Barefoot in the Park, we got Barbarella a couple years later. Clute is 6 years later.
Wow.
So this is like the big, start moment for her, which I guess makes sense. Again, like it might not be like a very well remembered movie at this point, but it was a pretty big hit. $20 million in 65 is nothing to sneeze at.
Right. And again, she uses that. What you said, she's blowing up, Ellie. Like she used that power in Hollywood to obviously take agency or authority over her career and be able to step up and say certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jane Fonda's great.
Jane Fonda is great.
The first note I have on her is you're beautiful. I'm like, she's always been such a beautiful, and she has, like I said, she has this deer in the headlights look that I think really like highlights her eyes in a way. And I was like, wow, she's gorgeous. Like, and she's gorgeous now, obviously, but it's like she's always been one of our most beautiful, talented actresses. I like see her be comedic and be able, like you said, to dance in the barn dance and things like that. I thought that was just really fun.
Yeah, no, like. I was swooning through half of her scenes, to be honest.
My second note is Jane Fonda is gorgeous. My first note is Nat King Cole.
Yes, Ellie Weir. That's the first note that I actually have. That's great.
My third note. To be fair, my third note is Cat Ballou shot some guys, but God forbid women do anything.
Yeah.
See, Ellie, you at least got to do that once this weekend.
I did. I am a firm believer in, she blew up a building. Well, God forbid women do anything.
Yeah.
Don't actually take that as a metric of my actual moral system.
But But yeah, I was just like, she's pretty and a bookworm. I'll marry her.
Touching on Clay too for a second, when he gets free and he's in her what do they call it, a room on the train, just a section that they curtain off. When I was watching him, when he's talking, and she's obviously in her pajamas or whatever, but like his eyes never leave her eyes. Like a normal guy would, his eyes would drift down, right? But he keeps his eyes on her. He's very respectful of her in that moment. Where I don't know if that kind of character, an outlaw, would act like that in that time. So I don't know if subconsciously we register in our heads that he's not really a threat. I don't know if that was a thought that anybody else had.
No, that's an interesting point. Because honestly, I was just too busy being like, are you going to have something untoward happen? Is something very 60s going to be happening? It did not, thankfully.
I think that like the scene is one of those scenes that could go very gross, but like I don't know, like Clay is more than Lee Marvin, at least. Like a big chunk of the comedy. He and what's the name of his uncle? Jed.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that whole priest scene was hilarious. Most obvious fake priest since Owen Wilson and the Haunted Mansion.
But they have such good like comedic back and forth. And I have in my notes that I really liked the bit where she looks out and goes, "Oh my God, you were right. There are men coming. You weren't lying. There aren't men coming." I wasn't lying.
Like, this is just a movie of bits, and most of them work, thankfully.
Yeah, I was very charmed by a lot of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's not like it's one of those movies where like it might not be like incredible, but 96 minutes, what do you need out of it? It's fine.
Right. I can't tell you what a relief that was when I looked at the length of it, because I guess I'm just ingrained to expect movies to be 2 hours and 20 minutes now. But it was like 97 minutes. Yeah, I'll watch the hell out of that.
Yeah, I've looked at like I was looking over my favorite movies of the year, and it's like I saw The TV Glow was like an hour and 40, Love Lies Bleeding is like an hour and 45, wow. Evil Does Not Exist is like an hour and 30. I miss when movies were like to the point.
Very streamlined and tight, right? This movie's not tight.
It's not tight, but
I was gonna say it's definitely not tight or streamlined. Again, this is a whole season of television smushed into a movie. I'm entertained by it, but there's a bunch of stuff that's just like, wait, when was this established?
She doesn't become an outlaw till more than I think half of the movie's over.
Something like that.
Yeah.
She does jump on the like murder revenge train like more or less instantly.
Yeah.
Which listen, I'm a daddy's girl, I get it.
It is extremely, it's very funny how like they go to see the cops and the cops are just like straight up lying to her face like, "Oh yeah, he's been here this whole time." Like you can't even come up with a plausible lie, man.
Yeah.
A cab, but especially these cabs.
Those cabs suck, yeah.
I have a list of cinematic cops that are like anti-propaganda with how much they suck.
I guess it's very streamlined in that way. Like you could tell, like slowly you realize that everybody's kind of against her, and so that's why she has to turn to breaking the law. But the scene where again you're talking about the scene where she goes and talks to them, it's like it doesn't seem threatening. It just seems obvious. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. Like they don't threaten her because like they don't need to. Why would they?
They got what they wanted.
Yeah. I was kind of like a couple of my notes are about how like there's part of the spoof just comes from having like reasonably realistic outcomes. Like no, the bandit camp isn't impregnable. They're just not usually worth the trouble to deal with. Or
the hole in the wall, right?
Yeah, yes, this dude was exploiting everyone, but he was also paying everyone, so they all hate you for killing him. Just a amusingly realistic outcome equals a joke.
Yeah. I was kind of also impressed because when you watch Westerns, the thing that I love, there's obviously the good shoot 'em up, bad guy, black hat versus white hat kind of Westerns. But like my favorite trope in any Western is when you have the encroaching civilization encroaching on the Old West kind of morals and things like that. I was not expecting this movie, because when you read it's a spoof or a comedy, you don't think it's going to delve into that. But there is that. It's like Shalene goes to the hole in the wall, and I can't remember the name. Cassidy turns out to be an old...
Butch Cassidy, yeah.
Yeah. He turns out to be like, Butch Cassidy of all things, but this is what he's turned to now. Like, this is the only way he can make money or, make his way in the Old West, that kind of thing. And it's like Marvin as Shalim, when he realizes I need to sober up, it's like, I can remember all these things. And it was just like, yes, I need to be able to do that. Right. But it's like, I don't know. I like that it at least touched on those things. I wasn't expecting it. And so I really appreciated it. At least had that kind of angle to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a good spoof does have like underlying, okay, but this is actually, there is some level of seriousness to it because, you're poking fun at the absurdity.
You're spoofing serious stuff. And yeah, I get it.
I mean, like I mentioned Blazing Saddles a little bit ago, which is I'm just to be clear, audience, way better than this movie.
Yes.
But like, it's another movie that it's spoofing a serious thing. It is racism is not usually a laughing matter, but it does it in a way that's like, I don't want to say fun, but it's like, it's funny. Like the Blazing Saddles is funny, the hottest take of 2024.
Racism in itself is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, it leans into that in a good way.
Yeah, sometimes you just gotta laugh at it because otherwise you're gonna be constantly crying.
Yeah.
I think that like the best angles on racism do sort of like point out how absurd it is, either as drama or as comedy. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's an inherently illogical thing to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking over my notes, and I did notice, I was speaking of movies that are a collection of scenes more than something very coherent. This was the 38th Academy Awards was the year of The Sound of Music, which, as I mentioned to Jasmine, and I'm sorry, Jasmine, up at the top, I don't like Sound of Music.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, why not? Like that's tangent into that, Ellie. Why not? Why don't you like Sound of Music?
I just find it very saccharine. I find
that's true.
I find I don't know. It's been several years since I've seen it. I was kind of an edgy when I saw it last, so maybe I would change my opinion now that I'm like a little bit older, a little bit less pissy.
Here's an important question: have you watched it since all of the awful politicians started saying the quiet part out loud?
Yeah.
Last time I watched it was 2014, I want to say. So no.
I feel like that might change things then.
It might change things, yeah. It might make me... Here's your back-to-back. You watch The Sound of Music with The Zone of Interest.
Oh, geez.
Now you have to do that the other way around so you can actually recover.
that sounds like a plan.
Sound of Music is funny because I agree that it's saccharine. What Pauline Kael famously said, that the success of Sound of Music makes you feel like you shouldn't do anything. Like, what's the point of doing anything?
Jeez, guys.
But it's like my mom and grew up on Sound of Music, and so it's been a part of my childhood. So yeah, it's goofy. I like when it gets more serious. But yeah, that's you can't disagree that it's not very saccharine, right?
Yeah, no, I can't disagree on that.
But you can lean into it or not. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see it for the first time until I was already 19, so I feel like that might be, there are movies that work for you your entire life, but you kind of need to engage with them at the right time for the first time, or they don't hit.
Yeah, I feel like a good big reason why it did end up hitting for me is because, again, I was also a lost, clearly undiagnosed neurodivergent person who sings all the time and is trying to find her place in the world, so...
Jasmine, I want you to know that I'm doing the end of the Invasion of the Body Snatchers scream, but I'm yelling "Theater Kid" at you.
Okay, fair enough.
No, that's not an insult. I
know. I
was literally in a theatrical production last night. For the record, Pauline Kael said about this movie that it's lumpen, coy, and obvious, a self-consciously cute movie.
Yeah,
sure.
She's not wrong. She's not wrong.
Well, it's the sentimentalism, right? Sometimes you lean into that stuff. Sometimes she was famously, again, like with that, or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, or I don't know. Like Pauline Kael is all over the place. You never know when she would like and what she wouldn't. I don't know if that's a positive or not, but like she says that about this movie or about Sound of Music. I can't disagree with that. It's just you like what you like, and sometimes you push against it. That's all.
Pauline Kael is one of those. There's several film critics that I, both in history and currently, that I follow on Twitter or whatever, who I don't often agree with them, as has been previously established. My tastes are pretty strange, but I can tell generally whether or not I'm going to like a movie based on what they say about it. And that's, I think, the actual mark of a good critic. If you can like read what they have to say and like understand where they're coming from and know how that applies to you, that's more valuable than just agreeing with them.
Sure. Like if we disagree with critics, it doesn't. I can disagree with them, but I can. Yeah, but I still enjoy it for this. I'm not going to get upset. It's just their point of view, right?
You and I have been friends for a while. I feel like we disagree about as often as we agree. But you know, you'll usually have good reasons and interesting reasons for why you agree with why you like whatever movie you like.
Yeah, saying that's the whole point. It's just not like a quick, you spout off a tweet or something like that and just sit back and watch the reactions. I don't like that at all. You really have to explain yourself. That's the whole point. Like I can see your point of view, but we can still disagree and we can still get along and enjoy each other's company. You know, and I'm sorry, like this is a weird tangent to go on with this movie, but it's still the same, right? We need to know where each other is coming from instead of just flat out disagreeing with each other.
No, 100%. Like that's important. But yeah, this move, like the pacing is just so weird in this movie, and usually that would bother me. But
Yeah,
I guess it's just not taking itself. It's just taking itself so unseriously that it just kind of almost plays as like a weird sketch comedy almost.
it kind of brushes past that criticism, right? It's like, yeah, it's
Mhm.
lumpy, but like whenever I would think, well, what's going on, or this is sloppy, I'd get a laugh, or Nat King Cole and Stubby K would come in and start singing, be like, oh yeah, I'm enjoying myself. It's a very
Exactly.
it's a light on its feet, fun movie. It's kind of hard to nitpick it, even though it's not perfect, but it's still enjoyable.
Or like Jane Fonda looks especially attractive, and it's like, yeah, no, I can't be
Yeah.
mad at you, movie.
Like cutting back to Julie Andrews every like 10 seconds in Mary Poppins. I'm like, yeah, keep doing that. I don't mind.
I One of my favorite shows is 30 Rock, and like people have pointed out to me, and not incorrectly, that like I don't know, at least a third of that show's jokes like completely fall flat. But like 30 Rock is just firing jokes at you so fast that like who can give a shit at that point?
Yeah, steady stream, right?
Mm-hmm.
Almost like Mel Brooks's movies. It's like I think it was Roger Ebert who said he'll load his comedy gun and just shoot like 1,000 bullets, and even if only half of them hit, you still have a pretty good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think of the Abrams Zucker movies too, like the Airplane and Naked Gun and Top Secret, which is my favorite of theirs. But like
mine too.
You fire so many jokes at us. Like one out of like 4 is bound to stick, or 8 out of 10. I don't know what the ratio is, but like if you fire them so quick, one of them's gonna get you. You know what I mean? And so it's just that steady stream of that comedy. That's what matters instead of being full out lame. I don't know.
I did have in my notes that I wanted to bring up at some point. Like we were talking about how Jackson isn't a caricature, and I really liked in my notes that they mentioned like Jackson doesn't drink, but he knows that the sheriff thinks that Native Americans drink, so he brings booze everywhere to piss him off.
Jackson, you little shit.
Yes. And I also really like, we mentioned that, Shalene is introduced, and he's like, we think he's the tall, handsome gunslinger. He's actually like a drunk wastoid. I really liked the reveal that he's like a drunken master gunfighter.
Oh my gosh, that is perfect. I have that note. I'm like, it's so funny that one drink and he's like solid on his feet. I didn't make that connection with that's perfect. Yeah, good. Jackie Chan ripped this movie off.
We're canceling Jackie Chan again.
He's got to stop making us do that.
All the characters have this, with Jackson, you're right. It's like when he shows up, I'm like, is this, I don't know this actor. Is he in brown face? Like, am I really watching this? And then like every time he would talk or every scene he was in, I'm like, oh, that's a well-written character. Like, I don't know. It kind of, it's upsetting, but you're still like, it's really, it's respectable, at least how it's written. All these characters have this like interesting kind of takes on it.
Yeah. And like compared to other stuff in the genre, yeah, he probably is leagues above most other Native characters, unfortunately.
Right.
Again, another reason why I would actually love to see someone try to make this a TV show again.
It could work.
I was like, yeah, it could work. I was like thinking about the Winona Earp comparison. Like one thing, we mentioned that Jane Fonda is really pretty in this movie. I also think she's really funny in this
She
movie.
is.
Her like freak out when she's like proposing they rob a train and then they refuse, and she like freaks out and starts throwing rocks at them. Genuinely,
it's like you all say you
yeah.
love me, but you won't do this one
thing after she's asked them to do so many. Yeah, I thought that was really, and they're all like they chase after her. Yeah, it's.
I love her. I love her so much. Cat, like, whatever criticisms I may have of this movie, I love Cat Ballou as a character. Just perfect.
Would we call her a progressive character? It's a knowing character.
Especially for her time, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm like not certain. Like I'm looking at the the year before this was a movie that Jasmine and I have covered before, which is My Fair Lady. So that's kind of like where
not for this show, right? You covered it somewhere else?
No, for
In Each my podcast. I'll talk more about that later.
That's kind of where we were at in terms of gender relations at that point. The year before that was also Doctor Strangelove, man.
Oof.
Look, I love Doctor Strangelove.
Oh, yeah.
You can't stop me.
No.
Listen, I have a fondness for it as well, but yeah.
No, that's just a movie all about how gender relations were in the 60s. This was like, this movie was shot in 64. This was before like the 60s kicked in, which was a surprisingly brief time period in retrospect, the 60s.
Yeah.
So I guess like in context of her, she wasn't in context of her time period. I guess she was reasonably.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at what our best actress nominations were. There's Maggie Smith in Best Supporting Actress. Rest in peace. Julie Andrews, Sound of Music. She lost to Julie Christie in Darling, which is not a movie I've seen. Patch of Blue, great movie. It's a weird. I know I say this every fucking episode. That it's kind of an odd moment in between shit. 65. We're starting to see that come around, but yeah, I guess I would say she's progressive for her era.
Well, that's the thing about the movie, right? It has all these like maybe problematic moments or problematic characters, but like it's hard to get mad at it. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
No, it does make a lot of sense, I think. Like,
is it just because the movie's so cheerful and because it's a spoof? I mean, what do you ladies think?
I think that's part of it, definitely. I think it just takes itself so not seriously, and it's just oozing with all of this goofy charm. Like, it's hard to stay mad at it, and also, especially when you keep reminding yourself it was the 60s, it was the 60s, it was the 60s.
To compare it to a much more sexist film, also from the 60s, also starring Jane Fonda, it reminds me a lot of Barbarella in that way, where like, is this movie problematic? Absolutely. But like, what is going to be gained from getting mad at Barbarella? What is going to be gained from like getting mad at Cat Ballou for doing what every movie did?
Yeah.
And painting, there are bigger targets. The movie itself is so breezy and so light on its feet.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not attacking a sacred horse here. Sacred horse is not the word I want.
Right.
Whatever. I would much rather spend my time getting mad at Gone with the Wind because people still really go to bat for that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you gotta pick your battles, man.
There are always worse things. I would argue there's worse things in Gone with the Wind even, but it's like
easily
that it's a spoof is like it already gives it like a leeway. You know what I mean? It's not taking anything too seriously. So there is some stuff to get upset with, but it's like it's hard when it's this cheerful and this Nat King Cole shows up and stuff and they start singing. It's like, well, I can't stay mad at this movie,
And again, it does enough right that while it of course can't cancel out the things it gets wrong, it's at very least gives us a sense of, okay, you're trying at least.
Yeah.
You're trying more than most of your peers.
Yeah. As I put in several times in my notes, like if he might be played by a white person, but yeah, Jackson is more character than a lot of Native American characters were. Yeah. Even years later, like
I would argue even in a lot of places now.
Well, they're mostly villainized, right? Jackson is not villainized in the slightest. They keep poking fun at him, like, aren't you going to lean into these tropes that we know Native Americans for? And he's like, no, why would I do that? It's
exactly. It constantly lampshades this sort of stuff, and not even by showing the stereotype, by having your Native character being all, why would I do that? No, thank you.
Yeah.
it's a not totally fair comparison, but we mentioned that I've been bringing up Blazing Saddles as a comparison point, and several of those moments remind me of like the work song bit from the beginning of Blazing Saddles, or like here's our cliche, and they're like, why would we do that?
Yeah.
Again, the drunken master comparison, I didn't get that until Ellie, you said it, and it was the same thing you two talking about Blazing Saddles. It's like, oh, that's what this reminds me of. It's just like it's a lighter, goofier, not as edgy Blazing Saddles. It's kind of doing the same thing, but I don't think it was at a place yet where people could take it and go, oh, I love this, and like Blazing Saddles obviously did. A lot of movies are very the times they come out, right, are so important to how they're looked at, and especially in the Oscar sense.
It walked so that Blazing Saddles could run,
Exactly.
I'd argue.
So how can you be mad at it for that, right?
But also like Blazing Saddles is kind of like, again, this is one of those like history is remembered in reverse kind of deals. But like Blazing Saddles is kind of remembered as the movie that killed the Hollywood Western as like the big genre, which obviously the movie wasn't going to do. We mentioned that the bartender at the Hole in the Wall is Butch Cassidy.
Yeah.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid hadn't come out yet. Like,
nope.
It was what, like 69?
Yeah, 4 years away. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
It was. Westerns were still very big business at this point. I feel like it's less. It's more like an Airplane kind of movie where like this genre is really big.
Yeah.
Maybe we can take it down a few pegs.
Yeah.
Let's have some fun with it.
Right. This movie's point is not to be Blazing Saddles. It's just kind of a light spoof of things.
And to be clear, like Blazing Saddles is remembered as the movie that killed the Western, but I don't think Mel Brooks set out to do that. Like,
no,
he that is it's remembered kind of in reverse as a very vicious movie. It's a very affectionate parody when you actually sit down and watch it.
Yeah,
it really is. Like,
right.
I don't think Mel Brooks ever really spoofs anything he doesn't have at least some affection for.
Oh, except for Nazis.
Which is part of why I think is part of the secret sauce, to be honest. I feel like most of the really good parodies or spoofs come from a place of love.
I think that like if you're gonna do a parody, it either has to be extremely fond or extremely not. Like, if you're not going to be like kind of fond about it, it has to be like, what's an example? The Tyler Perry parody in Atlanta, that is like some of the most vicious stuff I've ever seen in a comedy. And like there's no fondness at all, but if you can't go between those two things, or else you're kind of stuck in the middle there.
That is fair. You're either gonna be gently ribbing it, or you gotta be out to assassinate this shit.
Yeah, sorry, Ellie. That like Airplane, Top Secret, Naked Gun. They are very good natured comedies, and they are spoofing the cop genre, the spy genre. But you can tell that they've watched multiple of those, the spy movies or the Airplane does that. They've watched them and they're spoofing them, but you wouldn't know that if you hated those genres. And so I think that comes across. It's easier to like a movie like that.
There are several lines from Airplane that are like lifted wholesale from the movies it's riffing. Like so we need to find someone back there who can not only land this plane but didn't have fish for dinner. That's like a wholesale line from, I think it's Airplane 74 or something. I don't fucking know.
But it's just twisted just a little bit, and it's hilarious when you see, but it's not. It's so funny. It's so funny. Yeah,
exactly.
I actually haven't seen Airplane. I need to.
You've never seen Airplane? We gotta fix that.
Oh my gosh. Did that win any Oscars?
Absolutely no.
Get that on the show. Ah, damn. Okay.
One of the reasons why I'm like so willing to babble on about Blazing Saddles here is because unfortunately Blazing Saddles is not eligible for this show.
It's tragic. Tragic.
The producers is, but this one isn't. But Blazing Saddles isn't.
Okay.
Speaking of the Oscars, what do we think of our winner here, Mr. Lee Marvin?
You know what? Clearly he had range, because I didn't realize he was playing both our drunken buddy here and our bad guy. So that makes the gag where he puts on the nose and they freak out very, very funny. And I get it.
Yeah, were their standards lower? I mean, it's a fine performance. I just don't know who else was nominated against him.
Exactly,
Ellie?
that's what I'm wondering.
Richard Burton for The Spy Who Came In From the Cold.
Okay.
Laurence Olivier
Right.
as in Othello.
Ugh, no.
Rod Steiger for The Pawnbroker. Rod Steiger, who'd win in a couple years for
In the Heat of the Night.
In the Heat of the Night, and Oscar Werner from Ship of Fools.
I don't know enough about any of those other than the Othello one to really have an opinion. I'm pretty glad that Lawrence didn't win.
Yeah, don't give him that. Yeah,
just out of spite.
I haven't seen any of those.
Marvin has good monologues in this, and yeah, it's funny because even though he does play dual roles, like when he plays the other guy, he just kind of, we've always had bad blood between. It's not really a deep performance. I just think that he's very committed and he's funny, right? And he's
funny.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all you need, you know? He was exactly what this movie needed.
Right. I think the only one, I'm already forgetting who's the first one that you said. Dang it.
It was Ian Bannon. Oh, no, that's the supporting actor. Flight of the Phoenix. That's a great movie. Richard Burton for The Spy Who Came In From the Cold.
That's the one that I would look at and go, Richard Burton, let me see what kind of performance he gave compared to this. But
yeah, because Richard Burton usually puts in a good performance for sure.
Yeah. And so does Lee Marvin. It's like, I don't know if this was a legacy Oscar or if they just really, because again, you don't see a lot of comedies win for best actor. Best supporting actor is what I usually think they would win it for.
I was looking over his wiki, his IMDb page. He was like kind of in the process of like becoming a reasonably bigger name. He's the man who shot Liberty Valance, Killers just the year before this, and he was about to like do The Dirty Dozen, The Professionals, and of course the best movie of the 60s, Paint Your Wagon.
Interesting.
He was not like he was never like a big name, but you know, he was a dude who was around, you know, one of those guys who's just always around.
Yeah. A stalwart, yeah.
One of those character actors.
I do think he is very funny in this. He is, as you said, extremely committed to this role, which is admirable. I wonder if we're like, you know, I'm looking at it, won a bunch of awards. Like he won Best Actor at the Berlin International Film Festival. Like
what's happening?
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, were there not a lot of solid performances this year?
Hell if I know.
That's interesting. Like, I have no problem with his performance. I think it's a very strong performance. But if I hadn't looked that up until after the movie was over, and I was like, what did this win an Oscar for? Best Actor. Like, I wouldn't have thought, you know, I wouldn't have watched the movie going, oh, this is Oscar worthy.
No.
If I'd had to guess, and I didn't because I knew going in, but if I'd had to guess, is like watch the movie, figure out what it want to, I would have assumed either a technical or like some absolutely weirdo best original song fuckery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the best original song category is complete wild card.
Yeah.
Unless Billie Eilish is involved, then just go home.
Yep.
Was the Cat Ballou ballad, was it nominated for best song?
It was, and like the guy who did it, I don't.
So prominent.
It is so prominent. I almost wanted to go look up to see if they performed it at the Oscars, because those are always funny.
Right.
But I was like looking at the guy who did it, like Mac David, Bippity Boppity Boo from Cinderella,
Wow.
Walk on the Wild Side. You know, he did, where is it? The theme song from Casper the Friendly Ghost, 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Oh my god.
Maybe It's You. I Don't Care If the Sun Don't Shine. Like a lot of really famous songs. He sued someone for stealing some music from Hello Dolly.
Oh, jeez.
Okay.
Well, I know we talked about it. It's a very fun song, right? It's a fun song.
It is, yeah.
It's fun, but certainly not his best work.
No.
It's fun, and it feels like, you know, we mentioned that the vibe of this movie is very light, very breezy. I feel like it fits very well with the vibe of the movie. It feels like a little improvisational, but they're having fun, and you know, the two singers, Nat King Cole and Stubby K, they sell it really well.
Very well, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just always fun to see Nat King Cole, you know.
Yeah.
Of course. Especially now that I know this was released posthumously. That's
Yeah.
I was surprised when I found out it was released posthumously.
I don't know what throat cancer is, because his voice was still incredible in this.
right?
He was like apparently refusing treatment.
Oh.
Yeah, no, he kept working, and his daughter eventually came out and said, yeah, so he could make sure that he could support us before he passed.
Is this a
Ouch.
like Chadwick Boseman kind of did? Is that the kind of
Yeah.
Almost,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
That's what I was saying. Like, I figured when I, if I didn't know better, if I knew it was released posthumously, I'd assumed they'd have given it to Song as sort of like a, what they assumed they were going to do for Chadwick Boseman, like, or Heath Ledger, like a,
right.
Oops, sorry. Stubby K, incidentally, audience members, some of you might remember as Marvin Acme from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh!
Patty cake, right?
Fucking patty cake.
I'm not going to talk over much about that movie. That movie is eligible for this podcast.
Good.
It's I'm excited to talk about that movie someday.
Awesome.
Obviously.
I just wanted to say too, like you talked about the writer for the song, like Frank Pearson, like the credit for the screenwriter came up, and I was like, I know that name, so I looked him up. We just covered him on NostalgiaCast for Dog Day Afternoon, the screenplay they wrote for that, which is an awesome screenplay. I think he won an Oscar for that, but he also wrote Cool Hand Luke, and
that's a great movie.
Presumed Innocent in 1990. That's interesting, but yeah. It's weird watching Dog Day Afternoon and then this, and like, oh, that's the same screenwriter. But yeah, that's what a good screenwriter does. Just commits to the material that he's given, right?
Mm-hmm. It's adapted from something. Did I ever look up the book that it's adapted?
It was adapted from a novel from 1956.
Same guy that wrote Johnny Guitar, the movie that was adapted into the book that was adapted into.
Oh yes. Yeah, I was going to say, like, apparently it's not a very famous novel. It doesn't have its own wiki page.
Nope. I have to admit, I'm kind of curious now.
Yeah. Roy Chancellor is his name, the author.
Is the novel this silly? I don't know.
Could you make I guess you could. Like, I like Hitchhiker's Guide. It's hard to make a novel this silly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, let me look. I don't know how much more I gotta. I do say I really liked the recurring bit of the rich dude with the mustache is getting accidentally fucked with
while he's trying to take a bath.
And then gets killed. It's the same guy, right?
Yeah, and then it turned out to be the bad guy.
Again, playing with those
gets
tropes.
Killed while she's honeypotting him.
Mm-hmm. She is not committed to that honeypot at all. She is just like,
oh no. The one time she's not committed in the whole movie. But that's to the point, right? She's that's not her. She's more comfortable being an outlaw than doing the prostitution thing, I guess. That's really just it's again twisting those tropes. This whole movie does that.
Mm-hmm. I meant comparing it to martial arts movie. I really liked Shalene's training montage to like get back into shape.
It came the fuck out of nowhere, and I'm just like, okay.
But the look on Marvin's face, he's so committed to that moment and that character arc. It's so funny. And then you watch Jackson, and he's like, okay, like everything that they do. I guess this is important. It was really funny, and it went on for so long. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson's just so supportive in general. And then you find out that he did this because he thought that she was in love with him. And I'm like, okay, is every man in this movie just into her? My God. I mean, I get it. Right. I get it.
Well, every man and woman in this podcast is is infatuated. So yeah, I see it.
Yeah, I absolutely see it. It's 1960s Jane Fonda. I think, even if you're not a queer woman, you'd be like, maybe.
Would polyamory have saved them? I don't know.
That is always the question. I mentioned to a friend of mine, I was like, this movie should be made a TV show by the people who did Winona Earp, and she just responded to me, "You're just hoping they'll do what they did to Waverly and make her gay, aren't you?" I'm like, shut up.
And?
Okay, yeah, but also shut up, Jazz.
But yeah, no, fuck it. Make Cat Ballou bisexual. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, I would watch the shit out of that.
Add more songs. Like I said, get the folks behind Gallivant. Let's go.
All right, Netflix, you know what to do. Make a 2-season TV show. Don't advertise it. Cancel it immediately.
Exactly. On brand.
Oof.
On that particularly depressing note, I think I'm out of shit to say. Have you got any closing notes?
Jasmine, you have any? I've got one thing to say, but
we didn't really talk much about They Won't Make Her Cry, because I think that's like the most cohesive song in the whole thing. And it still has the improv vibe, but at least it kind of has a steady through line. Like, I'll admit, I half expected you to say that was the one that got nominated.
Interesting.
No, it was a Ballad of Cat Ballou.
Fair enough.
The won't make her cry. It leans in. That's again, it's the sincere part of the movie where it's not trying to joke with it. It's
Yeah.
really commenting on what's happening in her head.
Mhm.
So yeah, I agree with that.
Is it considered a separate song? Because I feel like it's almost
There's part of the chorus,
an extension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The movement, a different movement of the same.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fairness, that's not an unheard of thing with musicals in general. Like, you'll get like recurring themes and in certain things. I mean, look at Evita, for example.
I'm doing the theater kid point and shriek again, Jazz.
Go ahead.
I was in drama heavy in high school, so
Yeah, me too.
So we're all.
This is. I am hucking stones in my glass house. Everyone can watch me throw them.
Like, I mean, I met Ellie doing a production of Lysistrata, man.
You did, didn't you?
4 years ago, Ellie.
Next thing you know, I'll be calling you a nerd as if I don't play D&D with you.
Right?
You said you had another?
Yeah, the only thing I'm surprised that obviously it's the company that were able to talk for so long, but when I was watching this, I was like, how are we gonna? Because your episodes are usually at an hour and 20 somewhere around there. I'm like, how are we gonna talk for an hour and 20 about this movie? I mean, it's fun and it's light, and obviously we've picked up on some like different threads, so I've really enjoyed this conversation. But it's like, yeah, for a movie like this, it's hard to talk for 3 hours about it because it's not that kind of movie that demands it. I'm sure Gone with the Wind is going to be a long conversation because there's a lot to try and reconcile with that one. But that's not, like we said, this is not even Blazing Saddles. It's not even going that deep. It's kind of kidding these tropes instead of going full on satirizing them. And it's just a fun. I'm so glad that I finally watched this. That Cat Ballou song, I don't know why. I've had that in my head since I was a kid. I don't know if somebody sang it to me, but Ellie, when you told me Cat Ballou, I was like, oh, I know that song. I've always wanted to watch that movie. And so I'm glad that I've watched this. And again, the conversation that we've had, I think, about the movie has been, more rewarding than you would think a movie like this could. You know what I mean? Could kind of pull from this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of movies are like that. I think a large chunk of this podcast is supposed to be like I've kind of like heard of that movie. Like, we've got a movie coming up in a little bit that's directed by Ken Russell, and I fucking love Ken Russell, but I've never seen that movie. And like, okay, here's an opportunity to talk about a Ken Russell movie.
Absolutely, yeah.
Also, before we go any, I did just find out that at the end of Lee Marvin's acceptance speech, he said, "I think, though, that half of this belongs to a horse somewhere out in San Fernando Valley," which I love that. A reference to the horse that Kid Shalene rode, which appeared to be as drunk as Shalene was. Like,
it is a great, you don't say this super often about movies. It's a great horse performance.
Yeah.
Well, going back to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it's like Bob Hoskins is so good, but he's only so good because the puppeteering or whoever he was acting against had to be, you get that from him or pull that from him.
Someday, when I rewatch Roger Rabbit for this podcast, I won't be able to take notes. Every time I watch that movie, I'm just sitting there like, how the fuck did they do that?
Exactly.
And apparently this is also the Farrelly brothers' favorite movie.
Cat Ballou?
That tracks. Honestly. Yeah.
Okay.
Look, my favorite movie, as I've pointed out to Jazz before, is a horror musical Polish adaptation of The Little Mermaid.
Yep. Very incapable of you.
I can't judge anyone else's taste in favorite movies.
And also, apparently, there is a brief shot of it in A Clockwork Orange, and you see the Jane Fonda Columbia logo for a brief second in the beginning of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, thank you oh my gosh, you guys are pulling. You two are pulling like you're pulling these references that I didn't realize. I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like, it's a big part of Welcome to Night Vale, apparently, which I still haven't listened to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I need to catch up to Welcome to Night Vale. I haven't listened to it since the wedding. And also, apparently, they spoofed the hanging scene for when they were advocating for her execution for treason in 1972. Holy shit.
I'm gonna run some people over with my car.
Oh.
No, it's, the Farrelly Brothers thing makes perfect sense to me. We mentioned, like, I didn't see Sound of Music at the right time. I can 100% see this being a movie that you see at, like, the exact right moment of your life,
Yeah.
and it's like your favorite movie for a long time.
Oh yeah, I feel like little baby Jazz would have really gotten herself attached to this nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if it means anything, but I think I want to own this instead of just renting it. I liked it enough.
I think that means a lot.
Yeah. I am. Everyone knows that I am a huge proponent of visual media, not visual media, physical media, in all forms. And yeah, I love it when I like finish watching a movie. Like I watched Sound of Metal last time for our last episode. I'm like, I should see if I can get that Criterion copy.
Yeah.
Next time they have a sale.
Mm.
Because yeah, it's great when you see a movie. I'm like, this is something I want in my life.
Yeah. This is something that I'll put on again at some point.
Mm-hmm. Anybody got anything they want to plug? Jazz?
Well, as I've mentioned before, I am the host of In Each Retelling, the podcast where we explore all the ways old tales are made new. And you can find me at Favorite Vieira on all the socials. Also, when is this dropping?
Let me look at the schedule. I think it's the middle of October.
Okay, so by the time this episode drops, we'll be well into Monster Month 2.
October 16th.
Yep. Okay, so we'll be well into Monster Month 2. We'll have already dropped our episode of Callie's Wish episode on The Mummy 2017, Lisa Frankenstein, and our dear hostess here will be on our Halloween special, Van Helsing.
I'm very excited to talk about Van Helsing. I was supposed to be on The Mummy, but couldn't make it, which means that I have 4 pages of notes on the 2017 Mummy rattling around in my brain. Jasmine, help me.
We will figure this out, man. We will figure this out.
Darren, what do you have to plug?
Well, Jasmine, I'm looking at you're relatively new, right? 2023, I think was your first episode with Little Mermaid.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, back in May.
Well, you're on my queue list now, so I'm gonna have to.
Yay! Thank you.
I'm looking at your episode. Sorry, Elliot, but I'm just looking at the Frozen, Muppet Christmas Carol, like obviously the Great Gatsby. Yeah,
you'll if you listen to this, or we're like this and our friend Sam's sister podcast, 6 Degrees of Star Wars, are like the sister podcast. Right. So if you listen to them, you'll hear me, you'll hear Jazz, you'll hear Sam all over each other's.
Oh.
And River is starting their own soon as well. I'm going to hype that up real quick. The Straits Aren't All Right. It's on romantic comedies. Our first episode, I believe the first episode will be on Notting Hill, which ironically got mentioned in this episode.
Hold on, let me just Google something. Is Notting Hill a werewolf romance? Oh, man.
You wish.
That was probably the dirtiest joke I'm ever going to make on this podcast.
Okay, well, obviously, I'm the host of NostalgiaCast. Me and my best childhood friend, Johnny, we talk about movies from our childhoods. We're talking about 70s movies now. We're wrapping that up, so please listen to that. I'm also running a podcast, Back to Bluey, where me and my other friend, Rob, we run, I only have 2 friends, where we talk about Bluey, the TV show, for the Ludo cartoon on Disney Plus, all that, and we talk about as fathers and the different kind of parenthood skills and things that we learned from the show. Yeah, it's we're having, again, a labor of love, both those podcasts. Please give us a listen. And I'm on at DW Lundberg on Twitter.
Both those podcasts and Jasmine's comes highly recommended from me.
Thank you.
As always, you can find your host on Twitter, Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Medium at LSR42. You can also find me on Tumblr at Football in Tuxedos with dashes between the words. This podcast can be found on both Spotify and YouTube under the same name. If you're watching us on YouTube, please feel free to give us a like, maybe a comment so I know what I'm doing wrong or right, and mostly so the YouTube algorithm will like us. And thank you for joining us. In 2 weeks, come back. We'll be talking about a much better but also a much more serious movie, 2011's A Separation from Iran. Our first foreign film here. I'm very excited. Thanks both of you for coming out.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Cat Ballou.
Cat Ballou.
Cat Ballou.
Theater kids.